Hello and welcome to another episode from Kansas. And today we are going to talk about turning the fake democracy of the United States into a real one. Yes, it is true. What kind of democracy supports disenfranchising nearly 700,000 residents from having any say? What kind of democracy treats its citizens differently depending on where you live? You live in Wyoming? Great. You have the right to be represented in the Senate. You live in Washington, D.C.? Oops, sorry, you guys will not have any representation in the Senate. Forget all of that. The reason Washington, D.C. does not have statehood is racism. It is racism at the highest level, supported by nearly all the Republican senators, while aided and abetted by some in the Democratic Party as well. You want proof that it is racism at the highest level? Look no further than what the great unifier Donald Trump told New York Post on May 5th, 2020. DC will never be a state, according to him, because Republicans are not stupid enough to add 2 more Democratic senators and 5 more congressmen. Why don't you just take 2 senators and put them in there? No, it's not going to happen. And how many House seats is it? Like 4, 3, or 4? Whatever it is, you would have 3 or 4 more congressmen and 2 more senators every single day of every single year. And it would never change. No, the Republicans would never do that. Those were the exact words uttered by Donald J. Trump. So he agrees that the Republicans will not change their direction and embrace African Americans and work hard for their votes, but will be more than happy to keep them disenfranchised from the political system because of the way they vote. That is fake democracy, everyone, nothing else. Before we begin, a big shout to Damian Lynch for asking me to work on this video. Thanks, Damian. Appreciate it. Making Washington, D.C. the 51st state is the right thing to do. But when did politicians really believe that the right thing is the best thing? They don't. It will always get weighed up against political calculations, and some obscure point or some spin will be invented from somewhere, and the conversation will move into some other area. And finally, everyone will give up and the status quo will be maintained. Giving the residents of DC their right has been a decades-long fight that never saw the light. Because upholding the fake democracy helps plenty of people like the Republicans in some cases it even helps Democrats like Manchin who need the support of Republican voters from their state. In 93, the move to give statehood to DC was gaining momentum and the bill went for a vote in the House. It was resoundingly defeated with a 277 to 153 vote. John Lewis, in the final minutes of the debate, did really hit the nail on its head, saying that it is not right that there is still an America where there is some taxation without representation. The Republicans countered that by saying that the district hasn't even shown the ability to govern itself as a city, let alone a state. That's like saying he cannot drive because he doesn't know driving, but silently refuse to let them learn driving. The truth is, the reason the Republican Party does not want to give statehood to DC is because of the same reason why Donald Trump and his cronies wanted to intervene in vote counting in Wayne County in Michigan and Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. It is because Wayne County, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. have a ton of African American voters. It is as simple as that. Why does Wyoming, a state with far less population than Washington, D.C., deserve to be a state? Well, I will not say it is because Wyoming is 92% white while Washington is 46% black. You want the country to stop talking about systemic racism? Then giving statehood to Washington will be the right place to start, because as long as the residents of Washington remain without representation in the Congress and the Senate, we have systemic racism. The Senate in its current composition is the highest body in the country that reflects racism like no other body has. Take a look at this graph created by David Leonard. By giving 2 senators for every state, the states with less population are given more representation in the Senate at the expense of states with higher population. This Senate, the structure, was created centuries ago and a lot of things have changed, but the Senate has remained rigid and the representation became more and more racial in the process. White states with fewer people are represented at the cost of states with less whites and more people. As long as this disparity exists, how can we even talk about treating everyone equally? Can you see the grouping at the top? Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Montana. Most of them are Republican bastions filled with white voters, and all of them are very well overrepresented. Unless this parity is removed, we can all keep talking about racial discrimination and just keep talking about it forever and ever. Hear this out. In this Senate, in terms of representation, African Americans are worth only 3/4 of an equivalent white voter. Asian Americans are worth slightly less than 3/4 of white voters, and Hispanic Americans are the worst. They are worth only slightly more than half of an average American voter, white voter. If this chart you're seeing now is not evidence of systemic racism, then please explain to me what is racism. Republicans, as it was explained by Trump, argue that adding Washington and Puerto Rico is just a tactic by the Democrats to add more seats in their favor. But who the hell are they to talk about how people want to vote in these states? If they vote for a Democrat, then they should. If they vote for a Republican, then they should. If they want to vote for a third party candidate, then they have every right to do so. Let me ask you this. If not giving representation for people who live in Washington DC is okay, then what is wrong with Trump asking the results of Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania to be overturned in favor of him? Just throw out enough votes, enough African American votes or Democratic votes, just like what has been done to Washington for years, and win. I think he has every right to ask that then. Biden is the president today mainly because of the kind of support he got from African American voters.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, South Carolina. And my buddy Jim Clyburn, you brought me back. It's a man of enormous integrity. All those of you who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Yes, it is, Mr. President. It was their campaign. They backed you because they were desperate to see you in the White House. Not just African Americans, but people of color had his back, and that is how Biden is in the White House. Now the time has come for him to show that he will have their backs. If killing the filibuster is what it takes to recognize Washington and give it statehood, then it must be done. Kill the filibuster and grant statehood to Washington, D.C. immediately. A group of senators led by Senator Tom Copper from Delaware reintroduced legislation to give Washington, D.C. statehood this Wednesday. Joe Manchin from West Virginia continues to be a thorn in passing legislations that can change the direction of the country. He is a Democrat, but Sir wants to see the pros and cons before deciding whether DC should be a state. What he is saying is he needs to see if giving statehood to DC and recognizing 700,000 Americans will be good for his re-election chances in 2022 or not. If it helps him win, then he might support. But it is not going to help him win because he is from West Virginia. So he is more likely to side with the Republicans. I suggest the Democrats to primary Manchin and ask him to run as a Republican. It will be better that way. Maybe he can win and he can continue standing on top of the heads of people of color as long as it helps him win. And in doing so, he can also express his fealty to Donald Trump and capture all the MAGA voters. The other option would be for people like us to ratchet up the pressure on the Democratic Party and push all the 49 senators to get this done. If they feel the heat, then they can bring Joe Manchin around. I don't think it will be that big of a deal to turn Christian Sinema around, but Manchin will be a headache because he wants to be a headache. Because after analyzing the pros and cons, Manchin has decided the pros of siding against statehood is good for his politics. Biden and Kamala Harris have looked into African Americans and told them that they matter. They have responded. And now the time has come to repay the faith. The party that works overtime on white grievance is not going to make it easy to enfranchise hundreds of thousands of African Americans in one go. it makes no sense for them to support it. And that is exactly the reason why it must be done at any cost. Democrats make the case that the filibuster must go. DC must be given statehood, make a civil rights case for it, and dump anyone who stands in the way, along with the filibuster.